Okay. We have to take a slight diversion into
Oh,
constitutional
diversions.
history and background really, really quick. I promise you it's necessary. The problem here is that, of course, the Constitution has a few things to say about the election process and how democracy is supposed to function within the United States, which is just one reason I think that we should probably not throw out the entire thing. Certain people should
Mm-hmm.
understand.
No.
Within the Constitution, there's this one sentence. Article 1, Section 4, Clause 1. It is a compound complex sentence that features a semicolon. I'm very proud of the writer. It says, the times, places, and manners of holding elections for senators and representatives shall be prescribed in each state by the legislature thereof. But the Congress may at any time by law make or alter such regulations, except as to the places of choosing senators.
Yes, this is the elections clause of the United States Constitution. And in plain English, this means that state legislatures have authority over Senate and House elections, but that Congress can choose to override state election laws by passing a law. There was one exception, which was basically that states could choose where people could choose their senators, but that the 17th Amendment eventually superseded this clause by basically restructuring how senators were chosen at all, and then kind of nullified that part.
Yeah. Fun fact, or not so fun fact, depending on how you look at it, did you know that senators used to be selected by state legislators and not by popular vote? Yep. Thank you, 17th Amendment, for putting that power in the hands of the people.
Cue the more you know star.
Do.
Exactly. At the time that the U.S. Constitution was ratified, there was a considerable debate about whether or not allowing Congress to bypass state laws like this was a good idea. As Justice Joseph Story summarized in his Commentaries on the Constitution of the United States, states were concerned that this gave Congress too much power. They might elect to make election times so unreasonable that electors would be unable to attend, or in such an inconvenient place that electors wouldn't have the ability to actually exercise their right. Congress could also theoretically make it so difficult to actually hold an election that all but Congress's favorite choice for office could run. There were fears that Congress would just change the right of
The right.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, I think you're right. I wasn't expecting the word right there.
I don't think right is actually the word that I was trying to use, although it works as a not a verb, but a noun, I think. But there are fears that the Congress would just change the
The right to participate in an election, perhaps?
Sure.
Yeah, okay. We'll just go with that.
Sure.
Yeah. Hey, YouTube. This is what gets cut out of the audio pod.
That's right. Not in the podcast. Welcome to the rough draft.
Right. There were fears that Congress would just change the way that people participated in an election however they wanted to. For example, by tying the number of votes to the amount of property an individual owned. Dang it. I don't like the way that came out. I'm going to try it one more time.
Yep.
Okay. There were fears that Congress would just change the right of a person to participate in an election however they wanted. For example, by tying the number of votes to the amount of property an individual owned, and so on, without any consideration for how offensive such actions would be to the actual Constitution.
Right. In contrast, none other than Alexander Hamilton of Hamilton fame and no other place, in the Federalist number 59, argued that not giving Congress the right to regulate congressional elections could give state legislatures the opportunity to, quote, at any moment annihilate the U.S. government by neglecting to provide for the choice of persons to administer its affairs. which is kind of the same fear that Justice Story had about Congress having the ability to regulate congressional elections, if you're parsing that and reading between the lines. A group that had the sole power to dictate how elections, which are the primary mechanism for the people to express their will for the course of the government, if a group that had the sole power to dictate how people did that could then abuse that power to limit the actual practice of democracy, is bad.
Bad.
So it didn't matter which group it was, whether it was just Congress or just the states, not a great thing. However, given the way this clause is written, it gives state legislatures the first cut, the first attempt to control how congressional elections should be run, how federal elections should be run. Because of this, Hamilton posited that Congress would probably only get involved if, quote, extraordinary circumstances might render that interposition necessary to the U.S. government's safety. Justice Story, who was arguing the state side of things, agreed with this argument in principle, reasoning that members of Congress would be loath to impose election laws on states that objected to those laws. It would be very unpopular.
Exactly. Okay, so back to our gerrymandered map. Apparently, the North Carolina Supreme Court thought that the proposed map by North Carolinian Republicans was so egregiously unbalanced in favor of Republicans that it was unconstitutional. We have an entire episode on gerrymandering. It's in season 1, session 40, our very 40th episode, which is also part of a series on problems and challenges to voting in general. If you need a primer on some of the underpinning problems that we're discussing in this episode. So the very, very short explanation on a gerrymandered map is that it unfairly and illegally splits up or combines, in this case, North Carolina's non-Republican political populations so badly that it limits the opposing party's ability, the Democrats in North Carolina's ability to elect proportional representation to office. They can't get Democrats elected because the districts are divided in a way that means that there's never going to be a Democratic majority.
Or that Democratic majorities are consolidated to a minority of districts.
Yes. Yeah. So when you look at the state legislature, it is completely imbalanced in one direction or the other and doesn't actually represent the political makeup of the people of the area, the state of North Carolina.
Yeah.
This sometimes looks like a district map that makes no geographic sense, like a fat line that twists and curves and stretches really thin at some points from the west side of the state all the way to the east side of the state and then back south and then to the west side of the state again. And then it's impaled by a long, thin district for the opposing party. It's a mess.
Yeah.
Some districts have been drawn so thin in places that they barely encompass a single street. For example, see Illinois' 4th district for Democrats or Texas's 24th for Republicans. Seriously, they look every bit as ridiculous as they sound. And that's kind of the thing of gerrymandering.
Yeah. So for a quick recap here, North Carolina's legislature says, hey, there's this super cool map that will definitely only give Republicans an advantage because that's just how the cookie crumbles and not at all because of some very unfairly drawn congressional districts, I swear. And then the North Carolina Supreme Court says, no, this is really bad, illegal. Here's a better one. And then North Carolina's Republican legislatures say, well, no, we're running this up to like the Supreme Court, not this like little state level Supreme Court thing you got going on here. And that's kind of where we are in the story.